Abdulkarim, for your invitation. I'm going to, I think Professor Hisham Abdulghani gave us a very detailed explanation of the referencing and explained how tricky it could be, or how tricky it can get, particularly if you're writing a thesis, a much longer thesis or a paper, and there's a lot of modifications, and you might submit it to one journal and then that you can get a rejection, and then you'd have to submit it to another journal with different referencing styles and so on. I'll quickly try to go through this and how you can use Mendeley. So what is Mendeley? It's number one, it's a library. So as Professor Hisham Abdulghani showed you, you can get all your references and all the papers you're interested in one place, which you can access on your computer, or you can access elsewhere on your iPad, on your phone, and so on. And it's also a citation manager that helps you organize the reference list on your papers. So why is it important that we use a reference manager? Because what happens every time is that, you know, you speak to a candidate doing a thesis or writing a paper, you hear this quite often. You hear them saying, well, I finished writing my thesis, or I finished writing the paper. All I need to do now is just organize my references. And unfortunately, it's not that easy as you might think. If you haven't done it and you hadn't taken the time to work on these references as you go along writing your paper, writing your thesis, it will become a hideous task afterwards. And you might end up giving up on the whole thing just because of the references. So I did some research about the differences between EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero. These are the three most common ones. And I've personally used EndNote and Mendeley. I haven't used Zotero. EndNote is perhaps the most famous one, or used to be the most famous one. It does cost quite a lot. With Egyptian pounds, it's more than 5,000 Egyptian pounds for a full license, but you pay once and then that's it. You don't pay again in your life. If you are a student, you can apply for a student discount and get one for more than half the price off. You'll have to submit proof of you being a master's student or a PhD or an MD student or so on. Once you pay that fee, you get unlimited cloud storage. So the storage will never end for the rest of your life. And Mendeley is different. So Mendeley is free as long as you store less than 2 gigabytes online. And I've been using Mendeley, I think, for around 6 or 7 years now. I haven't even reached 1 gigabyte yet. I think I've reached around 800 megabytes. So that's over 7 years time. So I don't think I'll ever need to go more than 2 gigabytes. If I do need to go more than 2 gigabytes one day, then I'll have to pay 110 United States dollars per year. Zotero is also free, but it only gives you 300 megabytes of storage. And then if you want more storage, you also have to pay. They both are, all of them are almost exactly the same in their interface. So if you know how to use EndNote, you'll know how to use Mendeley. If you know how to use Mendeley, you'll know how to use Zotero. They are all cross-platform, meaning they work on your Windows laptop. And so you could be working on your Windows laptop one day. Next day, you could be working on your Apple laptop. The next day, you could be working on your iPad, and they will all communicate through the cloud. And your work sort of gets transferred with you from one platform to the other. EndNote, because it's a bit high-end, it supports something called collaboration between the team members, meaning that I could write something, a part of a paper, and then if I give it to my co-author, he could write, and he could also use the citation manager, and he could edit the paper without causing any problems if he also has EndNote. So practically speaking, I haven't come across a situation in practical life where I have EndNote and my co-author also has EndNote, and we used it together. It is if you're a part of a big study or so on, and everyone's writing his bit, then maybe that will be useful for you. Mendeley does not have that option. Zotero does have the option. EndNote is also a bit more professional when you're writing a systematic review. So if you write a systematic review, you need to identify what your search term was. So, and how many and which databases you searched, and the number of studies you yielded through that search, and then you need to identify your inclusion criteria, your exclusion criteria. So EndNote has a way to sort of keep track of that, whereas Mendeley does not. Zotero has a benefit of being able to capture websites and news articles. So if you're not in the medical field and you're interested in a lot of news articles and websites, Zotero could capture them, and you can save these web pages and news articles to your library. You don't get the option with Mendeley or EndNote. So what we're going to try to do is just quickly go through the installation and setup. I'm sure everyone knows how to install a application to their laptop. Want to understand how the library work, show you how to add references to your library and build up your library, and then reading the work in your library, and then how to cite the references on your paper or your thesis, and then how to change the different styles to match the journal you want. A lot of questions were sent about how to switch from EndNote to Mendeley. There's no automatic way to do this, but I'll show you a simple manual way. You go to set it up, you just go to the Mendeley website. You have to create a username and password, and then you are asked to download it. So just looking at the website this morning, I found two versions to be downloaded. There is the desktop version. It's called the Mendeley Desktop. This is the one I have, and this is the one that's commonly used. Just very recently, they've released a new version called Mendeley Reference Manager. It's more or less the same. It looks a bit modernized. The unfortunate thing about it is that if you have already written a paper and used the Mendeley Desktop, you cannot transfer to the new version of Mendeley, which is quite annoying, but they are promising that they will fix this in the future. So what I'll do is I'll show you how to use the original Mendeley Desktop, because the new one is still in testing mode. It's still in a beta version, meaning that it is only for testing purposes. So it's not the final version yet. So we might run into bugs and problems if we use the new one. So right after you install Mendeley, you need to install, as Professor Hisham mentioned, two plugins. So in the Mendeley Desktop, you'll go to Tools, and you have two plugins you have to install. You have to install the Web Importer, and you have to install the MS Word plugin. The Web Importer helps you capture your work from the internet, from Chrome or from Safari or from Firefox, whatever browser you're using. And the MS Word plugin, it helps Mendeley integrate in Microsoft Word so that you can cite your references. So you go and install the Word plugin, you get, again, like any normal installation. Then after you've installed these two plugins, this is how the library will look like. So you can see on the left side, you've got all your documents here. So these are all the different papers or different book chapters or whatever bibliography I have, the recently added ones, the ones I've recently added over the last week or so, the ones I've recently read, my favorites, I don't have any favorites, unsorted ones, which I haven't put in folders. Then I have different folders for different projects I have been doing. And I've organized my references into these folders. Here I have a list by the authors. So these are all the authors I have in my library. If you look at the old documents one, you'll find that the green one means I've read this. I've opened this before. This is a PDF saying that I have the full PDF on my computer. And then the authors, the title, the year published, and when I added it to my library. Just one click will show me the details of that publication. So I've got the title, I've got the authors, the journal, abstract, keywords, and the UI number, and so on. Because I have the PDF, if I double click, it will open the PDF. And this is quite useful because once I open the PDF here, I can then highlight certain parts of that study. So if after I've read it, I'm particularly interested in citing something from their results, I can highlight that area, or I can add a note to that area. And even if I close that paper, and if I come back in a month's time, or if I open it up in a month's time from my iPad, from my phone, I will still find that area that I highlighted, and I will still find the note that I've written. And I can write another note in this area. So this is a general note. So I'll say, will include this in my paper, for example. Oh, sorry, it's in Arabic, not in English. But anyways, you get the idea. So I can write a note, and again, this note will be saved so that I can know what I was thinking about when I included this paper in my study. Now, so this is how the library works, and once you've done a few projects, you will have a very extensive library. It's very useful when you're thinking about something or something you've read. You don't have to go and look through the internet and keep searching for the PDF. You will have your own personal library with all the abstracts you need and with all the papers you need. Okay, so how do I add information to that library? It's very simple. All you have to do is add. So you get these options, and the best way to do it is actually to add a file. What does that mean? So if I have the PDF of that study, then I can just add the PDF. So just for sort of demonstration purposes, I here have 3 PDFs, which I just downloaded this morning off the internet. These are 3 studies. So I can just pick this one, Al-Galali 2020, and now it's been added. Automatically, Mendeley has gathered all of this information from that PDF. So it's gathered the title, the authors, the journal, year, volume. It even has the DOI. So it did everything for me. And it's also telling me here that it has the PDF. And if I double click, or if I click on the PDF, then I'll have the paper. And I can then check and make sure that all the information that Mendeley has picked up or has pulled from that PDF is actually correct, because I can see the title, I can see the names of the authors, and I can see the journal and so on. And it's a good practice to always double check the information that Mendeley is picking up, because it does happen that Mendeley could incorrectly copy something. But however, it does check it with its database, and if it thinks that something might be wrong, it tells you and it asks you. You get sort of a notification here asking you to check these details, because it's not really sure about the details. Okay, so I think this is the best way to add papers to your library, because you will have the PDFs. And if you are citing a paper in your research, it's best that you actually read the paper and not just rely on the abstract. You will run through a lot of problems if you just rely on the abstract and draw the conclusion from the abstract and cite it in your paper, because you will get letters from these authors in the future telling you that you've misread our research, you haven't properly deducted the information from our research. So before you reference someone, you have to be sure that you actually understand what the message was, and the only way to do that is actually to read the actual paper. So it's very unlikely that you will cite someone when you don't have the paper. Now, the next thing is, instead of adding a file, let's say you've already done lots and lots of research, so you have a folder full of papers. So instead of adding a file, you just add a folder. So in this case, if I go to my desktop, I don't know where the desktop's gone, but anyways, you could always add. Oh, there's a desktop, and I could add the whole folder, and now it's going to add the 3 files that were in that folder. Again, it pulled out all the information from it, and see, so you can look at this one, for example, and just check. So it hasn't been able to pull out the abstract. And you can see why, because this is quite an old paper, and the format itself is one that Mendeley cannot read. So it hasn't been able to pull out the abstract. It has been able to pull out the authors and the name and the journal, the page and issues and so on. So this is basically the information I need. I don't really need it to pull out the abstract for me, because I have the full paper here. And this is the other one. It's managed to pull out everything because this is a more modern publication. So I have the abstract and I have everything here and now in my library. Okay, another very useful option is something called watch folder. And what is watch folder? Let's say you've started your thesis, or you've started a project on a particular thing. So on your computer, you're doing a literature search, and every time you come through a paper, you put it in a folder called project number 1, for example. So on Mendeley, you will tell Mendeley, go and watch this folder for me. And every time I add a publication to that folder, then automatically put it in my library. So in this case, you don't have to do any effort. You find something, you save it in that folder, Mendeley will just pick it up on its own. Another one is to do an manual entry. And this is probably not for journal articles. This is if you're referencing a book chapter, for example, or referencing a website, referencing a newspaper or a magazine article or a personal communication. Then you, at that point, I think the best way to do it, from my experience, is to do it manually. So let's say we want to do a book chapter. Here, this is a book chapter, Acute Management of Pelvic Fractures, a European Perspective. So this is the title of the chapter I'm using. So I'll put it here in the title. Okay, authors, it means the authors of the chapter, which I have Axel Geniezel and Hans Christopher Pape and Stefan Masters. I'm going to copy them and put them here under the authors. Then it's going to ask for the book name, which I'll put, the year, and which pages I got it from. So this is page 27. That chapter is from 27 to whatever, to page 30 or whatever. So then I'm going to put 27 to 30. Sorry, under the pages. And then it's going to ask about the editor, which is the editor of the book, not of the chapter. So we go to the beginning of the book, and these are the editors of the book here. And it asks for the title of the book, which is this one. And this way I won't have a copy of the chapter in my library, but I have an electronic citation, which I can then use to cite in my publications. Same for a website, and same for a personal communication or anything, you do it better manually. Now, let's say you don't have the luxury of having the actual PDF and you want to get it off the internet. So if we go, for example, to PubMed, and we search for anything like revision knee arthroplasty, for example, and we want to cite this paper, the first one that showed up, analysis of total knee arthroplasty and revision causes. So we don't have, let's say we don't have the abstract, but we want to cite this and want to add this to our library. Because I installed the plugin, I now have a Mendeley button at the top of my browser here. And if I click on that Mendeley button, what it's trying to do now is it's trying to identify all the references that it can identify in this web page, which it successfully did right now. So it identified the main reference, which is analysis of total knee arthroplasty, revision causes, and it even found a PDF. And you can see here that it's there's a PDF here in pink saying that it found a PDF for it, a free PDF. And there's other papers it also found, because if you look here at the bottom of the web page, there are other papers also at the bottom of the web page, and there are different references. So it managed to gather all of these references for me, but I'm not interested in all of these. I'm just interested in the first one. And there's a button here, like an edit button, which I can press and make sure that it has pulled out the correct information, which usually is the case. The only thing I would add is that it here has added the website. Now it thinks that the website for this paper is PubMed. PubMed is not the website for this paper. PubMed is the indexing website. And the problem is, if I keep this, once I reference or cite this, it will add the website to my reference list, which I don't want because PubMed is not the website. So I will delete it, and then I will add this to my library. So it's working now, it's adding it to my library, and now it's been added, and it also has a tick next to the PDF saying it's also added the PDF. Now this was Ann Postler. So now if I open my Mendeley and go to recently added, I'm not going to find it. Why? Because it added it to the cloud. It hasn't yet synced to my desktop. So I have to press the sync button. And now it's syncing with the cloud. And there. Now if I look for Postler, how was her spelling? And Postler. There we go. Now it's added to my library. And again, I have all the abstracted details, and I have a PDF, so I click on that PDF, I can open the actual PDF. So you can see that's very useful in organizing all my work. And see, this is what I told you about. So now it's not entirely sure of the details for some reason. So she's telling you these details need reviewing. You can mark them as correct or search Mendeley catalog. So it thinks something might be wrong. So I can have a look by myself and make sure that everything is wrong. And there's an option of telling it, well, I don't know, I can't find anything wrong. Why don't you look it up for me? So if I click search, it's now searched the Mendeley database to make sure that everything here is correct. And I can't see any problem, so I mark it as correct. Okay. So now let's go to a paper and see how to apply that and add that to my work. So you can see here we're writing an introduction, but whoever wrote it did not use Mendeley, and he just did some manual bibliography himself. And he used Kurtz et al. 2005 for this sentence, and Kurtz et al. 2007 for this sentence. Now we want to change this to a Mendeley one. Okay, so where I want to put my reference is where I'm going to put my cursor here. And then I'm going to go to references. And because I installed the Microsoft plugin, I have this tab here that shows. And I can just click Insert Citation. And here I can search for Kurtz 2005. But I'm not entirely sure. So it thinks it's this one, but I'm not entirely sure. This is 2007, 2005. But if you want to read it and make sure I am citing the right one, I could go to Mendeley, and it will open open Mendeley for me, and I can do a more I can do a search where I can actually see what's going on. So I'm looking for Kurtz 2005. There it goes. That's Kurtz 2005. So this is the one I want to cite. So after I've clicked it, and I'm sure I clicked the right one, I click cite. So now it's added a 1 after that sentence. I no longer need that Kurtz et al. 2005 because I've added that number 1. Then for this sentence, it's Kurtz et al. 2007, which I can delete. And I can add another reference here. Again, Kurtz. This time it's 2007. So now I have 1 and 2. Okay. Why 1? Because it appeared first it's the first reference to be referenced in my text, and 2 because it's the second reference that's been referenced in my text. Now, if I go to the bottom of the paper, here I have an empty reference area. Here I could ask Mendeley to put my reference list. So again, through that reference tab, I'll click Insert Bibliography. And now it has 1 and 2. 1 is Kurtz 2002, and this is Kurtz 2007. And if I go to that introduction, if I change the order of the text in my paragraph, so let's say I want this to be quoted first in my text. So now I have 2 before 1. If I click now refresh, it's going to fix it. Now 1 and 2, and of course it's changed the bibliography down here to reflect this change. So you can imagine if you changed the order of a paragraph in your thesis, or even took something from the discussion, put it in the introduction, it will take care of all the numeration for you, and you don't have to worry about ordering or keeping track of the numbers and the reference list while you're doing your work. If you go to another sort of paper like this one's already been done all through Mendeley. And after we've written it up, we want to submit it. So let's say we want to submit it to Journal of Arthroplasty, for example. So you go to Journal of Arthroplasty Guide for Authors, and it's talking about the reference, and it wants the reference between brackets. It wants the names after that. It wants the title, and then it wants the year, the pages, and then it wants the DOI. So if you go to Mendeley, you tell it that I want to submit this with the style of the Journal of Arthroplasty. You can see it comes with some basic styles, but it doesn't have Journal of Arthroplasty here. So you need to go to more styles, and you need to ask it to get more styles. And here we search for the Journal of Arthroplasty. And here's the Journal of Arthroplasty, and you install it on your system. So now that it's been installed, you can use it. Journal, there we go, use this style, done. So now let's change it to the Journal of Arthroplasty. So if you remember what we just said, so it wants them in these squared brackets. So the numbers are in squared brackets, and the numbers here referenced are also now in squared brackets. And we've got the author's name, we've got the title, got the author's name, we've got the title, and this one is a book chapter, so it's different, the first one. But the second one, you've got the author's name, you've got the title, you've got the journal, the year, the pages, and the DOI. And if you then change your mind and you don't want to submit to Journal of Arthroplasty, you want a Journal of Orthopedic Trauma, you just click on that, and again, now it's changes. So Journal of Orthopedic Trauma doesn't want these square brackets. And in the text, it wants round brackets in the text. So now it's done all of that for you. And more or less the citation of Journal of Orthopedic Trauma is same as Journal of Arthroplasty, but only very minor differences. But these minor differences is always a reason for rejection. And then they write back to you, please reformat your references and so on. American Journal of Sports Medicine, again, changes everything accordingly. And as you can see here, that they want these super, what they call it, the hyper or superscript numbers. So these are the superscript numbers here instead of the brackets. And this is the style that they want. And you can open the website for American Journal of Sports Medicine to make sure that this is actually the style that they want. You can also edit this. So let's say that because they change quite frequently. So this year, this might be what the American Journal of Sports Medicine wants, but it could change next year. So you can go to more styles, and you could go to the American Journal of Sports Medicine, and you can edit that style. It's a very complicated process of actually editing that style, but I have done it because I was submitting to a journal once, and they just a week or so before, they decided that they want to change some minor things in their style. So I had to go to this editor on Mendeley, and I had to change the style. It could become a bit technical at this point, but if it's usually a very minor alteration, and it can usually be done. Okay. So let's look at a few tips. Now, I think the main problem or main issue when someone's using Mendeley is that, let's say I write a paper and I give my paper to my co-author to have a look and to add bits of his own and so on. So he does that. He adds a paragraph here and a paragraph there. He modifies some stuff, but he goes in and he edits my references. The problem is that if he does not have Mendeley and if he edits my references, he will ruin the references. The electronic link between the references up in the text and the reference list will, for some reason, get lost. And if that happens, then I will lose all my Mendeley work, and I'll have to just do it manually. So what I would do is, if I'm giving this to someone, I would put a line here and tell him, look, do whatever you want to do in the top half of that document, but whatever you do not edit my references. If you do edit my references, I won't be able to restore them again. And at the same time, I keep a copy on my computer. So because if my co-author then edits my references, and I then have a point where I can start with and I can fix it once again. So that, I think, is a very important point. Now, another point is your library and exporting your library. So if we open Mendeley here, and let's clear our search. This is our library. Now, if everything gets stored in the cloud, but let's say I want to give my library to my co-author, for example. So I can go to File and I can export my library. And it will be saved in this format. I'll call it my collection, for example, and I will save it. I'll then be able to give that file to my co-author, and he will have access to my library, but that does not include the PDFs. He won't get access to my PDFs, and they won't allow that because of copyrights and so on, but he will have access to my digital files. Now, this is how, if you want to switch from EndNote to Mendeley. In EndNote, there is an option of exporting. So that's the way to switch, actually, is if you go to EndNote, you click on your references and you export it. And in this case, you export it as an XML file. And then once you've exported it to an XML file, you can then import it to Mendeley. You can ask it to import the XML file from here, from EndNote. You can choose that file, and then it will import all your references from EndNote. But the documents that have already been edited with EndNote will need to be manually changed from EndNote to Mendeley. A very good export option here is to export all your PDFs. So now that you have this huge collection of papers and PDFs, you want an organized folder with all your PDFs. So you could go File and you can export PDFs. You will choose a folder, desktop, for example, whatever, and you will click export. Okay, I'm not going to do it now because I've already done it. But what then happens is that it will take some time, and it will then export these PDFs for you. So these are all the papers I have, and you can see that it's organized them in a very clear way, with the author name, the year, and the title. So now, instead of having, because when you download a paper, it sometimes you get these very odd names and numbers and hashtags and very odd titles, and when you try to look for the PDF, it's very difficult to retrieve the PDF. So Mendeley now has this very tidy library for me, where if I'm looking for something in particular, I can just easily find it through a normal search on my computer. So I think I've covered everything I want, and I hope that was quick and clear. I think if you are writing a thesis, even if you have already started writing your thesis, you should take some time off and go and organize your references according to Mendeley. when you think that your thesis is about to end, you're still going to give it to your supervisors. They're going to change things. They're going to take chapters off. They're going to add chapters. They're going to take paragraphs from one end of the thesis, put it at the other end. And if you don't have your reference, everything tidy and in place, then you are going to get stuck.